Okay, in this video we're going to talk about how to find a perpendicular line, and we're going to try to find a perpendicular line to two different examples. We're going to find a perpendicular line to a line where we know the equation, okay? And then we're also going to find a perpendicular line to a line segment, like maybe let's say it's one side of a triangle or one side of a square or that sort of thing. Okay, and I'll show you little techniques you can use for both of them. So what does it mean to be a perpendicular line? Basically it means that I'm going to create a line that will intersect this line here at a 90-degree angle. Okay, so perpendiculars are 90-degree angles, lines that create 90-degree angles. Okay, and we always indicate well, I'll show you how we indicate those, what sign that we use. So here we have a line, and we happen to know the equation. We know that y is equal to 4x plus 2. Now, this is the slope-intercept form, remember, and the 2 is where it crosses the y-axis. So we know it's going to be at 2. Now let's say the question is, let's create a perpendicular line to the y-axis to where this line intersects the y-axis, okay? So we want it to create a perpendicular that basically goes right there. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing you need to know is that the slopes of perpendicular lines are negative reciprocals to one another. So let me say that again. Slopes are negative reciprocals to one another. Let me just go ahead and write this all out real quickly. Reciprocals to one another. So the two lines that you're going to create basically means you need to look at whatever their slopes are. Now let's look at the slope here. We know that there's a slope-intercept form, and the slope is going to be a positive 4. So we know that m is equal to 4 here, right? Now what's the negative reciprocal of 4? Now think about that. The word negative reciprocal, the phrase rather, negative reciprocal should give you the clue. First you take the negative, so it will be a negative 4. And then the reciprocal of 4 is 1 over 4. So the negative reciprocal is a negative 1/4. Now, how would I write the equation of the line that is perpendicular to this line and crosses the y-axis at 2? You would just rewrite it like this. Y is equal to negative 1/4 x intercepting at the same spot plus 2. Okay? And then therefore you have this line and this line are negative reciprocals of one another, and they form perpendiculars. Excuse me, I said that slightly incorrectly. This line and this line are perpendicular lines to one another. If I were to graph that, I can see it's a negative slope, crosses at 2, be there. We'd be say going down 1 over 4, down 1 over 4, and it would be this line. Okay? Now, let's do this one here. Let's find a perpendicular to this line segment. Now, this is actually used quite a bit when you're trying to find, like, let's say, perpendicular bisectors for in geometry, that sort of thing. And normally we want to create, like, a line that is perpendicular to the midpoint of this line segment. So what's the midpoint here? The midpoint is halfway between this point and this point. And remember that the midpoint equation is x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2. And in this case, it's really easy to figure out, right? So if I just add the x's, 4 and 8, you get 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Add the two y's, 6 and 2 is 8. Divided by 2 is 4. So the midpoint here would be 6, 4. And again, that kind of makes a little bit of sense, right? Because halfway between 4 and 8 is 6. Halfway between 6 and 2 is 4. So 4, 6 is the midpoint. Now I want to create a perpendicular line here. What's the first thing I'm going to have to do? I'm going to have to figure out what the slope of this line is so I can do the negative reciprocal. how do you find a line from 2 points? All right, so step 1, find a line from 2 points. All right, and I'm going to just basically find the slope. I know that the slope is equal to y2 minus y1, m2 minus, whoops, x2 minus x1. Sorry about that. Got a little carried away with my slope there. Okay, and it doesn't make any difference which one's the x1 and the y1. It really doesn't make any difference, just as long as this pair or this pair is designated correctly. So let's just go with 6 minus 2 over 4 minus 8. That gives me 4 over negative 4, or a negative 1. And that makes some sense, right? Because it's a negative slope going downward. That looks like it's pretty good. So now I have the slope is negative 1. What's the negative reciprocal of a negative 1? Let's figure that out. So I know the negative of a negative 1, negative, negative, gives me positive 1. And the reciprocal of negative 1 is just 1 over 1, right? Which is still just 1. So the perpendicular line to this point here will be, and I need to have it at 6, 4, right? Let's make sure I remember that. So now I'm going to have y is equal to 1x plus whatever the b is. Now, I don't know the b here because there's no y-intercept, is there? So is there another form I can use? I can use besides the slope-intercept form? And there actually is. Let me just write this down so you can actually write it in your notes. I can use, and I would use the point slope form. Now, what is the point slope form? The point slope form of a line is this. Y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. Okay, now what this means is if I know the slope, and I do, it's just positive 1, and I know a point, which is the x1, y1, and I do, plug everything in, there's your line. So I'm going to say y minus, the y here is 4, is equal to m, which we figured out was 1, the negative reciprocal, x minus x1, which is 6. Now, and this is a perfectly good equation. Now, one thing I want to point out, when you're replacing the x's and the y's here, you replace the x1 and the y1, not the x and the y here, okay? Just be very careful about that. And there's your line. Okay, I hope that was helpful.